feature presentation.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 113 of the Untitled Movie Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, how are you?
I'm good, dude. How are you?
Well, the last 24 hours have been quite the journey. I woke up the other day with half of my face swollen. Went to my family doctor at 4:45. She said, one, I shouldn't have shaved because I made it worse. And then I needed to go to the emergency room and have an abscess drained. And so I got there at 5:45 and spent the rest of the night into the early morning waiting for a doctor. And eventually I got home at 1 a.m. But the funniest part about the whole thing is that we have a colleague whose cousin was actually my doctor.
Small world.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, I appreciate you putting on your best Super Mario for today's episode with the mustache.
Yeah,
it's a good look for you. I like it.
It's a combination of Super Mario, but also Steve Buscemi from Fargo. So I'm cosplaying as both at the same time.
Okay. I'll let you know, enough from you, okay?
Oh, not knowing you with a beard or whatever, I thought the mustache was just the look. It looks totally natural. It doesn't look like you just did some kind of crazy change.
And that voice,
and that voice you hear, a very special guest on this episode. You may know him as one of the coolest dudes in video games, but he is one of the frequent hosts of the movie and TV podcasts In Review and Screencast. He is the biggest Ghostbusters and Mr. Robot fan on the planet. The one, the only, Greg Miller.
Hello, Matt and Eric. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for making the time to hang out with me today.
No,
and thanks Eric for pulling it together. You could have rescheduled. You didn't have to come in right from the hospital bed.
That's how dedicated I am.
I love it.
He loves this show.
Did a spider bite you, or is abscess? I guess there's naturally forming kind of sometimes.
It was an infection. So basically, it was either an ingrown hair or an infected cyst. So
gotcha.
Welcome to the number one cyst cast.
David Cronenberg-esque body horror, to start things off. But yeah, I'm very grateful that it wasn't worse or something else. But it was. Yesterday, waking up, like half of my face just looked completely swollen. Yeah.
I love that.
I'm glad you're okay.
Greg, it's so nice to talk to you. It's been quite some time. Do you remember the last time that we saw each other? It was EGLX 2019.
Oh my God, never would have guessed it. Never would have guessed EGLX.
Because we're from Toronto. And
sure.
Yeah. And that morning, I remember going into a meet and greet with you, and you went out to Stormcrow Manor the night before.
Yeah.
And oh my God, you looked a little worse for wear, but good on you for powering through that. And it's so nice to see you again. It's been so long.
I'm glad I'm making a better impression this time. That was literally a turning point in my life. I'm not even joking.
Was it really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You mentioned it on the Kind of Funny podcast, I think a week or two ago.
Yeah, it was like where I bought the Apple Watch. I was like, I have to get back into doing something, and that's when I started going to the gym again. I know, but it's two things. Number one, that was when I woke up so hungover the next day and so bloated. I was like, I gotta figure something out here. And then number two, it was like I think the only time in my career that I can think of, I was like, I fucked this up. Like I fucked up that meet and greet because I was like on the brink of death hungover. And it was like, it's funny and it's not, but it was also the thing of just like, that was a lot of people's only shot probably to meet me. And they came up and I'm all like blurry eyed and red and like just holding on to Nick, like trying not to fall over hungover.
You're great. Don't worry about it. Congrats on being a new dad. Fun fact, I think Eric and your son share a birthday.
October 8th?
October 8th.
Nice.
There we go.
Yeah.
How old's your son?
No,
Eric. No, Eric. I'm sorry. I gotta go. Eric, how old are you?
I was gonna say I don't have a son. I am 33.
Oh, okay. The Lord's year.
Yes.
Greg, how is that like? congrats again. And how has that been? Because we usually start the show with what we've been watching, but I want to talk a little bit. You're a new dad, and I think that plays into this, and we'll get into some other stuff.
It definitely plays into what I've been watching.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because I know you're a big video game guy, obviously. I think movies, always were kind of on that list of things that you enjoy, kind of maybe on the third or fourth slot. But obviously, Ghostbusters is a huge part of your personality. I think movies are a big part of your life. How has having a son impacted like what you've been watching? I know you still have to game a lot for work and things like that, but when it comes to, I know you didn't even get to see Eternals. Have you watched Eternals yet? What have you been watching?
Oh yeah, we watched Eternals. That was a.
Did you? Okay, exclusive.
Thank you. Come on,
did not need that. That was like, whatever. That's we stopped it in the middle and then didn't want to come back, but like I got to come back for in review, so we started it. And then Jen's like, I just don't like this. I'm like, I don't either. Do you want to skip to the end? We skip to the end. I'm like, all right, this is good enough. I'll watch the mid part before I come back on in review to tell you it's very low on the list, Kevin. All right, don't worry about it.
I love that. Exclusive. Nice.
But yeah, I mean, that's really how it's been. We timed our parental leave with being like, not on purpose, but let's watch The Sopranos. Like, I had never watched The Sopranos, and I've tried multiple times, and it's just never clicked for me. And so when The Many Saints in Newark came out on HBO Max, I was like, oh, well, this is perfect. Like, I was interested enough in The Sopranos. I like a good mob movie. Like, here's a 2-hour shot of The Sopranos, and we'll be done. And so we watched that together, and while not like amazing, it was enjoyable enough that when we finished, we were both like, you want to watch The Sopranos? And so we started that. And what I love about The Sopranos for taking care of a young child is that you can make it to the end of The Sopranos if you want an episode, but you can also just leave in the middle of it, like at the end of a scene, since it's just like the ongoing story of their life. I don't think it has a normal structure of like cliffhangers and things that are happening. Like, they'll drop in the fact that Artie's in love with this girl here, and then like 7 episodes later finally get back around to it. You're like, all right, cool, I can just check in, check out whenever I want to on this. So we pause mid-episode all the time, which makes it very hard when people are like, where are you? I'm like, well, we were doing really well. I think we're mid-season 4 right now, somewhere in there.
I love that. I'm in the same boat. I've always wanted to watch Sopranos, but it's just one of those things that feels so daunting. And I think in TV in general, I'm better at it now, but I've always been a movie guy first and foremost because I like kind of getting in, getting out, kind of 2 years down the line, revisiting the story. But I'm doing the same thing with Seinfeld right now.
Oh, wow.
I'm watching Seinfeld for the first time. My fiance, Nevis, loved it growing up with her parents and stuff like too. And it was one of those things where I loved Curb Your Enthusiasm. And she was like, I don't understand how you love Curb and have never watched Seinfeld. And it was one of those things. So I powered through 5 seasons of Seinfeld in the last like couple months. And I'm finally like, it took me a while to get into it. And Eric's been telling me to watch The Sopranos. So same thing on that giant
and Seinfeld as well.
And Seinfeld. Yeah. But I finally got to season 5. And it started to click season 3, season 4, because I feel like those first 3 seasons are kind of a bit rough, but I definitely feel you there of going back to a show that is so iconic that everyone keeps telling you to watch. But when you have so many other things that you enjoy doing, you would now have a kid, even though ironically you're starting this big series as you have a kid, I think is really, really cool. But yeah, Seinfeld's been, season 5, I think is close to peak Seinfeld. I just got to the marine biologist episode, which I just thought was
I reached in, I pulled it out.
It was so good.
He was angry that
Hole in
day,
one.
my friends.
Like an old man trying to send back soup.
I was flabbergasted on just how well written that episode was, where the punchlines just completely, like I was more even just impressed with it than just like even laughing out loud. But that's what I'm finding myself liking the most about Seinfeld. It's just very, very clever, even though you might not laugh as hard as you might at other things. I just, I'm enjoying the shit out of it. What else have you been watching otherwise?
I'm desperately waiting for Spider-Man No Way Home to come to digital. I, of course, snuck off to the theater to watch it with the Kind of Funny crew for in review. Jen didn't, though. And so it's like, I've been literally bursting at the seams to talk to her about it. And we just haven't. No, not really. Yeah, no, it's how great the TikTok algorithm is. She doesn't like any of that. She's not seeing any of that, so she doesn't have to worry about it as much. And obviously, our time on the internet, she's running in different circles sometimes than I am, because I will just sit there and nerd out about it at any time. So I'm waiting for that. Ghostbusters Afterlife, went and saw that in theaters too. Those are the only 2 things I snuck off to theaters for during parental leave. Got that now, obviously on digital. Waiting for my box set and the giant ghost trap to arrive soon with everything else. I, of course, had to get the Ultimate Collector's Edition for that. even though I already stole the making of Ghostbusters book they put in there, the reprint from the Glen Ellen Library in like 1999, but no big deal.
Absolutely love it. Have you rewatched it on digital yet, or are you waiting?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got it like, when it popped whatever the first night at 12:01, I was still playing games. So I did it, immediately jumped to the end, just watched the very end of the movie again to cry a little bit. And then, we did a rewatch of it then the next night, I think. And I think we probably spaced it out over 2 nights if memory serves, because Benjamin's schedule's all over the place. But we've watched it again for sure.
And I love that you brought Ben to the screening, didn't you, of Ghostbusters?
For sure, yeah. So for kind of funny, Ghostbusters in Review, of course, Interview is a show we do, and I know you know it well. You've been on it, right? Or is it just
I've been on Screencast a bunch of times, never in review.
One day you'll get there, don't worry. The big leagues. But we watch a film series and then review and rank them again, usually building up to the new one. So for Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is like the biggest movie of my lifetime, probably, for Greg Miller. We rented a theater, and we brought Ben there, and Ben was just over a month old. You know what I mean? We brought the headphones, awesome. We had the car seat, we had everybody spaced out, and we got to sit there and watch it. Even though, my wife Jen and Ben were all dressed in our Ghostbuster outfits, so we were ready to have that moment, and it was a very touching moment for me. McKenna Grace liked it a lot too. She commented on Instagram and Twitter about it. So there, so did podcast, whose name escapes me.
That must be such a cool thing that I imagine you can't wait to share when Ben's a little bit older to kind of understand that. Cause I think that like even me and Eric, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to have kids, but I feel like that would be a special thing. Like Jurassic Park is kind of that to me, where I feel like obviously the Jurassic Park sequels haven't worked out too well. But it's just like that moment of being this thing that's so important to you. And even though your son at this time, obviously 1 month old, has no idea what the hell's happening. But it's going to be to share that later.
Being such a ghost head is going to be so interesting what happens with him. And, for his dad to be so into it, like, I don't know if like the proton pack and the Trona Wand and Ghost Trap on the wall, like all the Ghostbusters crap I have around here, if he's going to have any interest in that ever or whatever. And I hope so, because to my left here, I have a closet that is packed to the gills with Ghostbuster toys I've bought over the years or been given from Playmobil and Lego and all this stuff for him. And so even if he doesn't care about Ghostbusters, he's going to have a lot of Ghostbuster toys to open, and we will see how that goes.
What's the one fandom you wouldn't want him, if he wants to rebel against his dad and not be a Ghostbusters fan and he became a huge fan of something else? Is there something you like that you would not want him, or it's just obviously as a dad, you want your son to be, happy and do whatever he wants and make whatever makes him happy.
For sure.
Is there one thing that if he didn't get into Ghostbusters and he got into something else, you'd be like, can it just be Ghostbusters?
I will. Yeah. I think I shouldn't say the one takeaway, the biggest takeaway I would take from my father, right, is I just want him to be happy and have hobbies of his own and his own passions. Because, my father is #1 crane operator, a local 150 construction worker in the streets of Chicago. So he is blue collar. He is up in the morning. He's working on the car. He's cutting the grass. He's doing manual labor. And, he never guilted his son for waking up at noon, going down to the basement to play games or going to the comic book store and drawing stuff. And he actually supported that. Now, me and my dad found, I think, common ground with the fact that my dad loves collecting things. He's a huge Coke collector. He
my dad is a huge Coke guy too.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So he's got another kind of glassware. And
worked at General Motors for 35 years, so like kind of loves fishing and the outdoors, which is like kind of the complete opposite of what I like.
Totally right. And so like when I started collecting comics and stuff like that, Dad really got behind that, not because he cared about comics, but because he understood collecting and he liked going to. He's the guy who pulls over and goes to the estate sales on the way home from work because he's trying to look for the finds. You know what I mean? And then text me about it or something. So for my son, for Benjamin, whatever he wants, the thing that I don't even like vocalizing it because I know Nick Scarpino will hear it and use it against me some way. But the thing that obviously we would have a problem with is if he wanted to be a fan of the University of Kansas, like if he wanted to be a Jayhawk, that we would have a huge issue.
Sweatshirt on right
exactly.
Now,
Luckily, of course, I don't have to worry about it because he's here. He's gonna, grow up. I mean, he's what? 3.5 months old now. You figure by the time he hits 1 year old, he'll be smarter than anybody at the University of Kansas.
Right.
So I don't think he'll be like, look, but it might be one of those things where he gets a kind of God complex and he thinks he can go there and rule them easily because he'll go there and show them a light bulb and how that works. And they'll be like, "Wah!" And their teeth will fall out because they're all rotten. And then, maybe he takes over Kansas. Maybe he can clean up Kansas. That'd be cool.
I don't doubt it for 1 second.
Greg, I wanted to ask you a quick question. Now, do you introduce Ben to the original Ghostbusters movie first, or do you start him off with the real Ghostbusters series?
Oh, what a great question. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I think it'll have to be such a personality read on him, because it's that thing of, I always talk about it with my parents, where I distinctly remember being on the floor of our first house on the carpet with the TV in front of us, and them keeping me awake to watch Ghostbusters on HBO. And remember, Ghostbusters comes out in 84. I'm born in 83. So we're probably talking about 86, maybe 85, but probably 86. And if you don't have children, maybe, and I shouldn't speak for everybody. For me, Greg Miller, who has a 3-month-old, about to be 4-month-old son, I know what a 4-month-old should know. I don't know when kids start forming memories. I'll worry about that when he's 3 or 4 and I know he's making memories. But like somewhere in there, they kept me awake to watch it because they knew I would like it. And it was that thing of like, I don't know how they didn't think it would scare me, and it didn't. I don't remember ever being scared of Ghostbusters. And I don't know. I don't remember a speech from them ahead of time of like, hey, like, I assume they would have of like, it's obviously not real, but also these guys have the tools to do it. Like, there's something empowering about Ghostbusters for 90% of the movie, because it is, the guys are just exterminators. Like, they're going out and literally getting cockroaches. Slimer's not a threat to them ever. It's only when they get to Gozer at the very end that something happens. So I've always, I guess my main thing is I don't want to overthink it. I want to see what he's drawn to, right? Like, I think as a child, it'll be fascinating. I think he's going to connect more with Afterlife, because Afterlife is such a dream. Like, I loved Monster Squad, right? And I loved Monster Squad because it was me as a kid watching kids fight monsters, and then making the business cards I thought was the coolest thing. And so like the empowerment of that, I think, is in Ghostbusters Afterlife, of seeing McKenna Grace go through this journey and be so smart, and then get the whole team together and all that stuff. Not to mention, knock on wood, by the time he's old enough to enjoy movies, maybe we have another one. Maybe the kids are even more into being Ghostbusters. Like, I think that's a cool avenue for it, and I would love to see if that reverse engineers where, oh yeah, do you want to see that clip of them in the streets of New York? I have that movie and we go watch that. But I also think I'm giving 4 to 5-year-olds way too much credit, where I think they just want something on the TV flashing. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was just the carousel of all the Ghostbuster stuff, and then whatever they like and want to rewatch a million times, that's what we do.
Love that. I should probably there'll be a lot of new listeners or viewers to this episode. So if you guys didn't know, this is the Untitled Movie Podcast. Each week, Eric and I, and sometimes a special guest, get together, shoot the shit about the entertainment industry. Sometimes it has nothing to do with movies and we just talk about nonsense, but that's kind of how we love it. We talk trailers, we talk news, we talk what we've been watching. Sometimes we have a topic of the show, but we have a couple other shows we would love for you guys to check out too. We do Untitled Movie Reviews. We're kind of bite-sized 15 to 20-minute reviews of new release movies. We have reviews out right now for The After Party. We'll have Pam and Tommy out very, very soon. Peacemaker, Yellow Jackets. I know these are all streaming shows, but theaters have been closed in Ontario for like the last month or so. So we've been reviewing a lot of streaming, like television and stuff like that. Cobra Kai 4. And then theaters open up as this podcast goes up. I believe theaters should be opened in Ontario again. So we'll have a review for Scream, Jackass Forever, and I think we'll be covering Murderville next week, which is a new Netflix show as well.
That's the Will Arnett one, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait for that. That looks so funny.
I watched it. I'll talk to you about it.
I'm jealous.
Matt, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your screen on my end is coming in really badly. You've been frozen for a big chunk of it. You might want to restart Discord.
Sure. Should I just restart Discord or get out and come back in? Eric, you talk. What have you been watching?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny because, like, again, like, as we're kind of getting back into watching movies, it's interesting that, like, a lot of stuff is still, weeks away. The other day, I just found out that the Roland Emmerich movie, the disaster film, Moonfall, is not coming to Canada at all, which is kind of a bummer, because a disaster movie at the beginning of the year. Well, I mean, his movies aren't always great, but I find, like, if you're getting one of his films at the beginning of a year, at least it can be entertaining and fun. And
that I give you. That was the thing. Like,
a palate cleanser. So
for me personally, like, it's like I have those. There's like a good trailer, right? And when it hits in a theater is like I have like 3 or 4 of those memories that just stand out. Like, oh my God, I remember where I was. I don't think I'll ever forget this Moonfall trailer because we were all in there for Spider-Man No Way Home. Everyone's fucking pumped. Let's go. It finally starts. And then the moon's falling out of orbit. I'm like, what is this horrible movie? And everybody's laughing at it. I'm like, what is going on?
But that's the great thing about something like that, where like it does bring people together if you feel comfortable enough to go to a theater and, you know, kind of enjoy it, whether it be ironically or sincerely. And yeah, so I was weirdly kind of looking forward to that movie on just that level of kind of just laughing with or at the film. But yeah, it's just odd that, you know, a big kind of studio movie isn't even coming to Canada, which is odd.
Have they said if it's coming to digital, Eric, or no?
No, they haven't mentioned that. So it might come to digital within like, you know, a 4 to 5 week window, but other than that, it's not playing theatrically here in Canada.
Yeah, I'm excited to get back. And I think I kind of got cut off when I forgot I was plugging shit. But yeah, anyways, YouTube podcast services, Untitled Movie Podcast, one-stop shop to find everything. Letterboxd HQ is Untitled_movies. But yeah, back to the theaters this week. I'm pretty pumped for it. So I know theaters have been open in SF, Greg, but I know you've been kind of trying to avoid it. How are things in general over there? Because it's so much different in the US than it is in Canada. Like we're in another lockdown. It's freezing out here.
For sure. So yeah, how is it for COVID over here?
Yeah, just like how.
Honestly, we're, I would say, lucky in the way that I feel like, you know, I have family all across the country, and you know, in Chicago, like I remember, I don't even know, late 2020, and they're like, "Oh gosh, you guys are still in lockdown." Like San Francisco took it so seriously that I don't think it was, even when they let up some of the restrictions, when they're like, "All right, now put your mask back on." It wasn't the end of the world like it was in other places. And obviously there's plenty of examples, I'm sure, here where it was and people flipped out and were too stupid about it. But overall, I think it's just still a continuation of 2020 out here. And so it's the same thing we've been doing, which of course wears you down and is, you know, maddening, right? Like of like what to believe and what to do and how to do it. But I think the more and more, you know, we get either vaxxed or boosted and then just have conversations. It was like, this is what life is now. You know what I mean? Like there was a, you know, Jen follows so many different, baby things now or whatever, and there's one lady whose name escapes me because it's Jen's bag, but is very much, you know, stumping for a better parenting and whatever, and she, you know, does Q&As and stuff, and she has, you know, a bunch of degrees or whatever, and it was like, listen, like it was like a question of, you know, can they go to this or that, or can they have somebody visit or something. I think it was around Christmas, and she's like, this is going to be the reality for at least the next X amount of years. Like it's, have them test before they leave, have them test when they get there, and go off of that information. Like that's all you can do right now. Otherwise it is either you're in full lockdown or you don't care, but you know, neither of those, it's somewhere in between where it needs to be true.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, it's been rough, and it's, you know, especially then having, you know, a baby that's unvaccinated, but it's like, you can't be vaccinated, but then it's like, well, he's taking Jen's breast milk, so he's getting some antibodies, but it's like, you know, and then babies put everything in their mouth to begin with. And so we went to the pool. We did his first swim class, and I'm in there with a face shield on and all this stuff. But then he's putting the rubber fish thing that floats, I'm like, oh God, in his mouth. And it's just like, he's got to build an immune system. We got to do this. You got to you know, do some of this, rip the Band-Aid stuff off. But it's
and that's kind of how I feel about going back to the theater on Monday. It's like, I think this will be the new normal for a bit. And they're still doing like the social distancing in the theaters here as they open up in 50% capacity. So I'm pretty excited to see Scream finally. I've avoided all
Dude, I want to see Scream so bad. Not only do I love Jack Quaid, like I love Scream. Like I loved those movies growing up.
Same, man. So it's been kind of like not as bad as Spider-Man. Well, Spider-Man we saw early or right away, so I didn't have to really dodge spoilers there. But I've had to do the old like mute everything on Twitter kind of thing. I'm seeing photos pop up on Instagram and Facebook now, and I'm like, was that trying to tell me something about something? And I've tried to avoid it for so long, but
who is the killer?
I'm just so excited to go back. So. Eric, I know we've both seen Pam and Tommy. We're going to review it early next week. So I feel like we can kind of hold that conversation. I mean,
is it good? I want to know, is it good? Is it good?
It's great. I loved it, dude. So we've seen the entire series. First 3 episodes are out on Hulu in the US and Disney Plus here in Canada, starting next week. We've seen every episode. We'll do a full review on Untitled Movie Reviews, but, quick thoughts, really, really loved it. I thought, Lily James is just incredible as Pamela Anderson, and I thought Sebastian Stan and Seth Rogen and everyone else is great, and it's probably my favorite thing Craig Gillespie's done, even though he only did the first 3 episodes. But Just I think it balances a lot of different tones really interestingly and is just like really thoroughly enjoyable. Eric, you're not done yet though, right?
No, I'm only on episode 3, but so far
okay.
in terms of it being a really thought-provoking character study, I think it works. And to your point, like I think Greg Gillespie is kind of tapped into obviously the homage montage sequences that both Martin Scorsese and Paul Thomas Anderson kind of did so well with like the single
Yeah.
takes, or the cameras
Needle
kind of
drops.
dollying in and out of characters and locations, and that all works. And it is a very kind of interesting conversation to have in terms of consent, and
Yeah.
when it comes to how Pamela Anderson has been very vocal about the series not wanting to go ahead, and her and her not participating at all and being a consultant, and the whole show being about
that,
how it's about consent, and how that she was victimized by the tape being leaked.
Greg Miller.
So Greg Miller from Kind of Funny, thank you. As you guys know, like I like watching stuff here and there, but I'm not into it the way you guys are and the way I'm into video games. I know obviously the thing, but I thought they would have been. Is Tommy Lee involved? Like, how did this happen if they don't want it to, if she didn't want it to happen?
He met with Sebastian Stan. I read that they met about him playing it, but I don't think either of them, I think because of, I don't know, it was some of the things they cover in the show of it being newsworthy and all this kind of stuff. Like, I think that's kind of how you get around actually getting their permission and things like that, because I think they're just telling, it's more from the perspective of the guy who stole their tape. But then
is it based on a book or something?
Yeah. It's an article.
Yeah, an article. Yeah. And they cover all of that. And some of the stuff you're talking about, Eric, they even go into the series, which I really liked. And they kind of condemn all that. And then, but it is this double-edged sword of like, the series in itself is a little hypocritical because it's kind of almost putting a spotlight on this horrible thing again that Pamela Anderson went through and doesn't want to have to go through again. And now they're kind of putting that. It's good though. And I think it does kind of take that and reinterpret it for, the Me Too era and things like that. And there's some really, really great funny stuff, some great disturbing stuff, some like, it's just like, it's all over the place when it comes to like tones, but everyone kind of kills it, and it's really, really good.
How much is Sebastian Stan naked?
A lot.
Everyone is, I think, wearing prosthetics. I'm pretty sure everyone is. But I'm shocked at at how graphic it kind of gets at times, and it goes to some places. It's like there's a moment in episode 2, no spoilers, but where I'm like, okay, wouldn't have called that happening. And there's a cameo from someone that I'm like, okay, they did that. Yeah, it's really, really good. So next week, it's
an amazing showcase for the special effects and makeup and prosthetics specifically. And again, like, it is an interesting series to have that conversation about, because I think I, Tonya also kind of did something very similar, where it's taking somebody who became a punchline in late night talk show sort of comedic stand-up bits, and then it kind of sort of recontextualizes how we look at somebody kind of going through a media whirlwind or storm, and how we're at that point in like the late 80s, early 90s, maybe weren't as empathetic and thoughtful to how that person felt going through it. So I think that's really interesting about that show. And again, it's just fascinating to think that like this is a show that's on in Canada, Disney Plus, and Hulu in the US. It's very raunchy, it's very sensational at times, but it's also, again, very considerate, even though there is a hypocrisy or hypocritical aspect to it because of Pamela Anderson not giving her blessing to the series, which I think is a fair criticism for the show.
Yeah. We'll go full review, but Greg, have you watched any of Book of Boba Fett? I know you've been watching Peacemaker, because I mean,
love Peacemaker. Oh my god,
yeah, it's so good. And you guys can check out your screencast. You guys do weekly recaps, so we don't necessarily need to go into huge detail there, because I wanted to get to our topic of the show before we got to let you go. But
sure,
Book of Boba Fett, have you watched much of it, or?
No. So what happened with Book of Boba Fett is Jen and I loved Mandalorian. And so when Book of Boba Fett hit, it was very much that first day of like, it's back with Star Wars and Disney, let's go. And we booted up and watched that morning. And it was one of the things that ended. And it was like, okay, That was good. Like we're not, neither of us are huge Star Wars fans. Like we like Star Wars, but like whatever. And so it was one of those. All right, I will watch the rest. And then they came, and it just wasn't destination viewing. And so like I guess that was episode 1. They just did episode 5, right? And so like,
which I highly suggest you and Jen maybe watch.
Well, that was the thing. Everybody was freaking out about episode 5, so I just hit up Tim. I'm like, what is it? What happened? And Tim explained it. I was like, all right.
You
like,
could
I'll go check it out. I don't know.
Yeah, my fiance bailed out on episode 2. She watched Mandalorian with me, and she's not a huge Star Wars person, but she enjoyed Mandalorian, enjoys the movies and things like that. But after episode 2, she was like, I don't think I need to watch this. And I'm like, no, totally fair. And then after episode 5, I'm like, okay, can I just show you this episode? Because I think you might enjoy this episode. So without spoiling it for people, but I suggest you watch episode 5. Because
what Tim described sounded cool. And I've seen then, of course, like on Instagram and TikTok and stuff, like the comparison things of like, well, this is that from this. And I'm not spoiling things either. So it was like, oh, I see why people are into this.
Yeah, cool. Let's move on to kind of the topic of the show, and the kind of news is lumped into that. Yeah, I love that. So breaking news earlier today, this isn't kind of in the theme of what we're going to talk about, but it does look like Jason Momoa is going to star in Fast and Furious 10.
My man.
So I love that. I mean, they needed to replace The Rock, right? The Rock came out, kind of said, no, fuck that. I'm not going to
get out here, Vin Diesel.
Yeah. And I was saying to this Eric, we talk all the time off podcast, obviously, but like the whole thing with Vin Diesel calling out The Rock in that Instagram post, I'm like, I think this is going to backfire. Like The Rock seems like one of those guys who's going to be like, fuck you, dude, talk to me in private. Don't just like post this and try to make me look like the bad guy when I come out and say I don't want to be in the movie. So that obviously did backfire. They need someone to kind of fill those shoes. So it looks like Jason Momoa is going to star in
but I thought John Cena was the replacement.
Yeah.
It seemed like that was like Vin Diesel trying to get back at The Rock, and then Vin Diesel, as you mentioned, publicly trying to get The Rock back in, but thankfully The Rock has self-respect, so he said no.
Well, you got to think Cena's back in the next 2 as well.
Maybe, but I mean, like, he didn't really track as well, I don't think, as they were hoping in terms of kind of bringing him into the fold, and I almost feel like Jason Momoa is them kind of like re-strategizing. It's like, okay, well, we need to get somebody who is charismatic and likable enough, but can also play maybe an anti-hero type character within the franchise.
Yeah, I'm down. I don't really like, I like Momoa enough, and I think that like he's the perfect kind of guy for a Fast movie, especially like a villain. You got to think Charlize Theron's coming back too, and like I'm totally down for these last 2. Yeah, like I didn't love the last one, but I did rewatch it recently, and I love all the flashback stuff, and I still had a good time with it, so I'm still very, very much excited. But Momoa seems like the perfect guy for this kind of movie.
I just want Simon Rex to be cast in the film so bad.
I would love that. Yeah, love that. Okay, then the topic of the show, I wanted to talk about, obviously you're one of the coolest dudes in video games, Greg. So I thought kind of tying in video games and movies, it's a topic that I bring up a lot on this show. Eric's not a big gamer at all, but obviously sees all these video game movies, or I make him talk about all of them with me.
But we have the PlayStation 2, so.
Okay.
Hey, it's a great place to peak. Don't worry about it.
So couple pieces of news in the last couple of days. We got an official announcement that Mortal Kombat 2 is coming from Warner Brothers with the Moon Knight writer, Jeremy Slater. A new Halo poster for the Showtime TV series dropped, which says the trailer is going to be debuting this Sunday. As of recording, as this goes live, it's probably already out. You guys should check it out.
The episode's already dated.
And speaking of The Rock, he talked about bringing one of the biggest, most badass games to the screen, which he didn't say which game. And Greg, I know on Kind of Funny Games Daily, you guys were theorizing, or maybe Gamescast or something like that. You were saying you think it could be Fortnite.
I'm putting my money in Fortnite. Yeah, I think Fortnite's ready to make that move.
And do you think it's an animated movie, maybe with his character from there? I don't know what they do.
I don't think so. I think they would do it in live action, because this is a normal thing of like, right, like when they video game movies, right? And I know where I talk about them. But
I can't wait to hear your thought. Yeah,
right. Where it's like, do you need it to be a 1-for-1 adaptation? It seems like stuff like Detective Pikachu and Sonic actually do better when they're not trying to be Tomb Raider, when they're not trying to be Doom.
Yeah,
or Resident Evil, I guess, is a better example.
Yeah, and that's kind of the topic I wanted to talk to you about. And I know I talked about it with Blessing, actually, when I jumped on your Hitman stream, and I had a great conversation with him. And then, has there been a great video game adaptation, and will there be? Because I think this year especially, and this is talking about that Gamecast conversation that I think Tim and other people brought up too, where I think video game movies are coming kind of full circle this year, because I think it was really interesting, and I was looking things up, where in 1986, the first ever movie based on a video game was Super Mario Brothers: The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach in Japan. And then you had the first live action video game movie being the Super Mario Brothers in 1993. And then this year we're getting Illumination, makers of, Despicable Me and those fucking Minions I hate. Do we think that Super Mario Brothers could bring everything, rule of three, full circle video game movies, be the first great movie adaptation of a video game? And I know we have other things. We're a couple weeks out from Uncharted. We have possibly the Last of Us series. We can kind of loop in TV series because I feel like it all kind of blends now too. Because I think that's interesting. And there has been a few, TV adaptations and things like that maybe come close. But I just wanted to kind of open it up to Greg, you, and Eric, you can jump in too. Do we think there has been a truly great video game adaptation yet? And if not, do we think there's going to be one?
I think the closest you've come would be Sonic or Detective Pikachu. Those were, and I think that it's hard to say because of what are we saying adaptation? Do we mean that it is a direct?
That's another conversation, right?
And that's my whole thing is I think if it's got to be a yes or no, then I would say no. But I'm giving you the caveat. I think these two movies were close, and my vote would be that I think Last of Us will be the one. I do think Last of Us has the right team behind it with Craig from Chernobyl, Neil working on it, Pedro Pascal. Everything they're putting into that sounds great. And we already know the story of The Last of Us is great. And so if you're going to treat it with the respect it deserves and give it the space to breathe, I think that's going to be something special. The downside you'd say or see with that, right, would be, of course, hey, what about zombies being played out? Is it, how do you make Last of Us, the game obviously was different than The Walking Dead, the comic. And I know there's been The Walking Dead games, but it's that idea of the interactivity of Last of Us made it feel like not another zombie thing. Whereas seeing it on screen, maybe it will feel like another zombie thing. But I trust Neil. I trust Craig. I think they can do something really cool over there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in total agreement with you, where I kind of made a list here and I can just read them off and we can go through everything. But I said, out of adaptations of things that are either okay to pretty good to maybe great, I say the Super Mario Brothers is a cult classic. I love that movie. It's terrible, but I love it. This last year we had Werewolves Within, which is actually based on a Ubisoft game. Was actually surprisingly decent for a murder mystery kind of thing. The Tomb Raider movie is totally fine. Sonic the Hedgehog, as Greg mentioned, Detective Pikachu. The 2021 Mortal Kombat was divisive, but I know people like it. The 1995 version, so bad it's good. And then Resident Evil Raccoon City was almost so faithful it became awful but almost enjoyable because of that on the movie side. And then Greg, to your point, I think if you're talking movie adjacent, then you kind of have things like Free Guy, the Jumanji sequels, Wreck-It Ralph, Ready Player One, Grandma's Boy, The Wizard, Last Starfighter, War Games, Tron, things like that.
Even the Kingsman, right? The Kingsman very much takes that first-person kind of approach in several sort of major action set pieces.
Yeah, and then documentaries, King of Kong, Indie Game, the movie, Console Wars, High Score. So it just depends on how you want to frame the question. Because I agree with you, Greg, where I don't think we've gotten a great video game adaptation. I liked Sonic the Hedgehog enough, but I can't say that is a good movie. Is it an enjoyable one? I think to a lot of people it is. And same with Detective Pikachu. I think it showed a lot of potential. And then when you go back to The Last of Us and then TV shows in general, some people might be screaming The Witcher. And I'm well, I think The Witcher was an adaptation of the book novels more than the games, right? So
and that's 100% correct, right? Yeah. And I think obviously they borrow from the game here and there, but it is, they've been very clear it's about the book. Witcher's great. Witcher's fantastic. I would, universally, or that's not even the right thing. I'm tired. Sorry, it's been a lot of podcasts today.
No,
I would enthusiastically say yes, Witcher is great, but I don't. They've said that it's based on the books and not the game, so I don't count it there. And that's what I think I'm missing from the video game movie conversation. Definitely, I don't put in the documentaries. I don't put in the Free Guys or whatever that are in the video game world. I'm thinking I took the question very much it's an IP. Yeah, exactly. And that's where it gets weird, where it's we rented Sonic the Hedgehog and I really remember enjoying it. I haven't thought about it since I left it. Since I clicked the power button, I haven't thought about it, but I was that was good. And Detective Pikachu was a similar thing where I went in, Jed's a big Pokemon fan. And so I went in like, okay, cool. Yeah, I like Ryan Reynolds and this looks nice. And I remember that movie ending, being like, oh man, I had a great time with that. I really enjoyed that. But again, it was one that we walked out and I think we played Pokemon Go in the bar next door. And then like, I didn't think again about Detective Pikachu, but I remember enjoying it. And those are a step above personally for me, like Tomb Raider, which and not Angelina Jolie, the most recent one where I went to it. Yeah, and based on the Crystal Dynamics games. And it was the one I went into and I enjoyed myself. And I thought they did a clever way of doing the video game storyline, but not making it the video game storyline. Because in the video game, you literally fight a ghost at the end or whatever. Like this one, they got around that in a more realistic way, which I appreciated. But again, that was like, maybe a 7 on the IGN scale, where I was like, okay, cool. That was good. I'm not, again, going to think about it. I don't want more of that. Whereas I'm hoping Last of Us is every episode I'm ready for the next one. And then when the season ends, I want another season and so on and so forth.
So as someone who covers video games all the time, do you even pay any attention to when these things get announced, or are you excited ever? Like Uncharted's in a couple weeks. Speaking of a kind of 1-to-1 adaptation like Tomb Raider, very similar, obviously. But do you think they go the supernatural route with Uncharted? Do you think that movie hits? Like, do you care at all? I know you're a huge Uncharted guy too. You reviewed it at IGN.
Yeah,
love that series. But
what are your thoughts on Mark Wahlberg playing Sully?
Thank God he's not playing Drake. You know what I mean? Yeah, like when they originally announced that, like a decade ago, when I had to talk about that on Podcast Beyond or whatever, and it was like, I guess whatever. That sounds like a bad movie. Like, so there's a lot of questions you just ask. Like, do I pay attention? Frankly, no. Like, I think, back when I was at IGN in 2007, 2008, like, and it was people trying to do this, then it was bigger news of like, wow, somebody's trying to do this. Maybe they'll crack it. And as we've gotten more and more, it's just happening left and right now to where, like, you talked about Mortal Kombat 2. I still haven't seen the original Mortal Kombat, not the, you know what I mean? I haven't seen the first Mortal Kombat in the new series. Yeah, I haven't seen the most recent Mortal Kombat. And like, I didn't even know that news. Like this today in the Kind of Funny roundup of like what we're doing next week, Tim's like, if you want to be on the Halo thing, don't watch it this weekend. We'll do a react. Who wants to be on it? I didn't say I wanted to be on it. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not my jam. I enjoy the game portion more than I enjoy the adaptation of it. But like Uncharted, I'm cautiously optimistic about. Like, what I want from that Uncharted, the bare minimum of what I want is the Tomb Raider. Where I went to Tomb Raider, I watched it, and I was like, no, that was enjoyable. I had fun. They didn't butcher it. I love Tom Holland. I'm sure everybody who loves MCU loves Tom Holland, right? Like, I'm excited to see more of him. I'm excited to see what they pull from the game and what they don't. I want to see whatever Nolan North's cameo is going to be, right? They put up that photo of him there in the blue and white like shirt, which was the Nathan Drake like first test footage outfit they ever had him in the game. So it's like, I can't wait to see them bump shoulders or whatever that's going to be. But in terms of my hype for it, it's non-existent because I'm not going to go to the theater to see that.
That's
like that. I had all you motherfuckers on the ropes. I had you there with the day and date digital during the pandemic. We were there, and then y'all wiggled out of it, and now I'm back to like, oh, go see it in the theater. I'm like, no, I will not see it in the theater, and like, good on you if you want to, but that's not where I'm going to go for it.
And do you think that's just a mentality for you to bump off video games? I mean, I agree with you. Last of Us has so much potential, and I hope they don't drop the ball. Like, again, what you were saying of having Neil be involved. He's directing an episode. Craig Mazin from Chernobyl is great as well. And like, it seems like with PlayStation Productions, they're starting, and even back to the Mario movie, like Miyamoto being involved and Nintendo being involved. I think when you involve the creators and have them part of that creative process, instead of just thinking it as IP you can sell to someone to completely do whatever they want, like the Max Payne movie or the Hitman movies or the number of movies that are like, what, this is nothing. Even the Assassin's Creed movie, you're like, this doesn't feel like what people loved about the game at all.
And to shout it out, and I know I'll get hate for it. You know what, a movie I thought for sure I would hate and Jen wanted to watch so bad and I enjoyed? Monster Hunter. Like, Monster Hunter, don't get me wrong, not a great movie, but it encapsulates what the game is.
And that's
fair. You know what I mean? Like, the game is running around hunting monsters. And like, I was like, man, how are they going to get the modern? Oh, and they bring it back into like what the Monster Hunter is and the Palicos and stuff. I was like, okay.
And I feel that because I feel like how you felt about Monster Hunter, I felt about the newest Resident Evil movie too. Because like I think you might sort of enjoy that if you like the first 2 Resident Evil games, because it's like almost so faithful. It's almost like, okay, well, this is not a good movie, but I'm going to enjoy it for this reason. Which I think is where video game movies are kind of at right now. And then that's why I hope like the floodgates might open once, Last of Us is great, or one of these movies is great. Mario is great. Like, if Mario is great, then we're probably going to get, we've already know we're getting Donkey Kong Country with Seth Rogen. And then we're getting probably Star Fox would be the next most cinematic thing that I think could be really cool. Eric, I loved your idea whenever we talk about this, that you want a James Gunn Earthworm Jim movie, awesome. Which I think would be awesome.
Real quick, just a 10-minute warning.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I just think like superhero movies, it took so long, and then once they started to hit, I feel like then the floodgates open. So I'm curious if we're going to get that with video games.
And I think you are, right? Because it's the same reason superheroes are working is the same reasons video games will work as well. It's that people grew up on this and they loved this and they saw it done wrong and they wanted to do it right. And they know that it can work. And so I think, again, is like, our generation, or at least my generation, I know you're 33. I don't know how old you are, Matt. My generation, right, is the first two.
Am I? My birthday's in like a week.
33 on February 8th.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Eric.
Eric's keeping track. I love it. My generation, I feel, is the first to grow up with video games. Yeah. And so now I'm old, and I if I was making movies the way I'm making content over here, you'd see that stuff start to get reflected. And I think, it's a good thing of seeing something like 8-Bit Christmas pop and happen and find an audience that wasn't. I was having my family members hit me up that weren't video game people, be like, "Oh, this movie was great. Like, I really liked it." And it's like, that's where we are. As video games are synonymous as entertainment, and people have a history for it. And even if you don't play games now, you dropped off like the PS2, you remember maybe an NES and what it meant to get an NES on Christmas. So that story can resonate out there.
I love that. And quickly before we go, I know you're a big proponent of day and date.
Hell yeah.
So last thing before we wrap up, do you think that is the future that we eventually get there? Because I'm kind of with you. Like, even for someone who loves going to the movie theater as much as me, I've been a big proponent of just let people watch what they want to watch, how they want to watch it. And the industry will kind of adapt that way. And I don't think cinemas will die. There will always be the Erics, the Matts, the Tims, or whoever that will want to go to the theater, the Kevin, Joey, like, who will want to go week by week and see things on the big screen. But then I think from an accessibility standpoint, and for a new father standpoint, and for a COVID standpoint and things like that, like, I'm with you that I think things should be day and date. That you should be able to watch it at home. And if you want to go to the cinemas, you can. And that's a bigger conversation, but I know you're kind of in that same boat too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no way to stop it. I think it's the same. It is like games, where I feel like, in the early part of my career, there was this pushback against digital, and you wanted the shops and you wanted those things, and people still want that, and it's still there. And I think that, I look at, like, right now there's this rush back to cinemas because obviously the movie companies were holding back so much, and because they didn't want to lose their money on it. And the way, you look at Black Widow, the way contracts were set up and negotiated, and there's a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo, red tape, earnings, yada, 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 that they didn't plan for. And I think as you sit there now and see Spider-Man's doing so well, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. But there were so many conversations about it's the only thing playing at the theater. What about this independent? What about that movie? What about this smaller tier? Like, you're going to see those be Amazon Prime. You're going to see those be Netflix. You're going to see those be day and date digital on a smaller run screen. And I think that opens the door to this continuing, and people need to evolve to it. And that was the big thing. I've, again, pushed for this for so long. Yeah. And that was before I had a kid, and it was before COVID. And now that so many people have had that taste, I think you still see that. I'm not alone in the whole thing of like, yeah, I went and saw Spider-Man, but I'm not going to go see Uncharted. I'm not going to go see this. I'm not going to see that. And yeah, we're going to get to a, new normal, and people, get over it, and masks and yada, yada, yada. But I still think there's going to be an audience clamoring for that. And I think that movie studios and streaming services are smart enough to know there's money in those hills. And especially as we see something like Peacemaker right now continue to get more popular. Peacemaker is so popular. And I mean, I say that as someone who's in love with it. It's my favorite thing from the DCEU, period. And I love James Gunn, but I had no faith or desire for this show when they announced it. And here I am, totally like, I'm or whatever. Like, HBO Max has something. Disney Plus has something. Like, Disney Plus, the MCU shows have owned and dominated, and clearly bolstered the build up to a big tentpole movie, bolstered up to Spider-Man, even though it's, Sony versus Disney, but same universe. And I'm sure we'll do the same thing when we get to Doctor Strange, Enter the Multiverse of Madness, right? Where like, when they show that, and Scarlet Witch gets a pop, right? Like, oh my God, like, people love her based on this show. And like,
and that's what I mean.
It will work hand in hand, and they will figure it out. And I think contracts will get renegotiated, and it'll change.
That's what I mean. I think there's two ways of doing it. I think streaming services buying up theater chains and making it part of that subscription package could be one way. There could be the exclusive window of only 1 or 2 weeks, and then it's on home right away. That way you still get those first couple weekends of people going to the theater for the people who can't wait 1 or 2 weeks. But it'll be fascinating to see how it changes. But I'm kind of with you on that, where I just feel like, I love going to the movies, and I think there are a lot of people who do, and they will continue to do that. But even me who loves to go there, sometimes where I'm like, I wish I could just fucking watch this at home. Like, I don't want to go out tonight, or I don't want to deal with all the shitty people at the theater, things like that.
And it will be a part of, like, you have to go where the people are. And this is something, that we learned at IGN when I was there. I was, lucky enough to be there and see it, where when I started at IGN and YouTube was just getting footing, there was a conversation of, should we put IGN videos on YouTube? And everybody said, no, we have IGN.com. They'll come here to watch the videos. And that was not the case after a while. And they went to YouTube. And I think it's the same thing here, as we continue to be more and more fractured in terms of our attention spans, as we more and more distractions, more and more content, more and more whatever. Like, theaters and movie companies will have to pivot to serve that audience. They can't sit there and be like, well, we're just going to only put the movies here. Then people bitch when it's only superhero movies, because that's the only thing that would get me to move, right? Like, the next thing I'm going to go see is Batman. After that, the next thing I'll go see is Doctor Strange. Like that, I have to go see those movies, but everything else I'll check at the door and not worry about until it's on.
So I think they still need to figure that out, but I can't wait to see where it goes, because there's so many different ways. Greg, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really, really do appreciate it. It's been so fun to finally make some content with you. I've been on other shows and things like that, but thank you so much. This means the world to me. You guys have been a huge inspiration of this podcast and kind of my career. So I just want to say I'm truly grateful for you doing this, and it means a lot to me.
It's a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. I'm glad we finally got to do something. Tim's not hogging you all to himself. And Eric, pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well, Greg. Really
sorry about your face.
Really
nice to somebody. I had to do it.
If you guys like this, we have a couple other podcasts we would love for you guys to check out. As I mentioned, Untitled Movie Reviews, Untitled Movie Conversations. We review movies, we talk about trailers, different things like that. Find us on YouTube, Untitled Movie Podcast, probably the easiest way there. Podcast services, just search for those 3 shows. If you want a one-stop shop for everything and you're a big movie person, I hope you're on Letterboxd. If you're not a sponsor, but it's a great app, you guys should be on there. We have a Letterboxd HQ, which is Untitled_movies. All the links to our reviews, our socials, our star ratings, everything's over there. So go over to Untitled_movies on Letterboxd. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And starting Monday, I'm starting a new gig at Family Feud Canada, everyone. So you might see some questions of mine on Family Feud Canada, but I'll keep you guys posted on that.
Congratulations.
It should be interesting for sure. And on all social medias at Matt Rohrbeck. Eric?
And I'm Eric Martin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211. Thank you very much again, Greg. Really, really appreciate it.
Greg, you want to plug anything? Go for it.
Yeah, come and check out all the stuff we do about movies over on youtube.com/kindafunny. Of course, you get the Kinda Funny screencast and in review wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Kinda Funny.
Until next time.
Game over, Greggy. Game over.